Hi, I'm John McPherson. This is Jerry, my wife. And in this video, we're going to show you how to properly care for basically any large game or small game. We're working with a goat here. It's deer season. Temperature when we shot this was 62 or 63 degrees. It was plenty hot in December in Kansas. But it's not always hot. And what we show you here is a quick cooling off process, because the longer the animal stays warm, it starts to deteriorate the minute you kill them. And we have to stop this process. So you have to remember that always it's not 62 degrees. There's times you want to leave that skin on the animal. And when it's super, super cold out and you don't want that carcass to freeze right away, that skin acts as an insulation, and it'll help the skin or the animal from freezing too quickly, so that you can go and cut it up and butcher it out or take the sinew off, whatever you want to do without it freezing. Of course, a frozen animal, you keep that forever in a camp and just slice off, take an axe and chop off whatever you want to eat. What we're going to show you is what we do when we take an animal, a freshly killed animal, and open it up and just remove everything that's inside of it that you're not going to utilize, and we'll throw it out. And we're showing you here with just a simple knife. We use 2 knives in this video. How to field dress the animal, how to skin it, remove the sinew for different purposes if you are into any primitive aspects, and how to just with a knife cut this animal up. We're not butchers, we don't pretend to be. We're just showing you how you can at home save yourself $30, $40, $50 by taking an animal and, as Jerry says, cutting off a big piece big enough to throw in a frying pan. Well, we get a little bit more advanced than that. We get steak and roast, and we bone the animal out completely. It saves room in the freezer. It saves having to have an additional piece of equipment in the way of a saw. So when you're done viewing what we're showing you, you'll be able to tackle it yourself, or any aspect of it. You can advance it up. You can make hamburger, which we don't. We just turn it into stew meat. You can use a power saw and cut chops up, which again we don't. We just take the loins out and cut those up as our tenderloin steak. So, in whatever little over hour viewing time we have here, should give you the confidence to tackle it yourself. It's a real simple concept of taking an animal, and a rabbit or a deer or a moose or a cow, whatever, they're all basically the same. They're all put together the same. And here, using a goat, if you follow the rules on that, you can apply it to just about anything else and give you a real satisfaction of self-sufficiency, besides saving you several dollars. Hi, I'm John McPherson, and we've got a game down. No matter how you got it, whether it was with bow or rifle or muzzleloader, once you get large game down, you've got to do something with it in a hurry. Today our temperature's running right at 55 degrees, so if we don't do something real quick, we're going to have spoiled meat. You have to remember, from the minute that animal dies, he starts to rot. And if you leave its insides in for very long and its skin on for too long, you might just as well pick up a roadkill that's been laying there for 3 or 4 days, because it's going to taste the same. So what we're going to do is take this animal. In this case, we're working with a goat because we don't have a handy deer. And what we're going to do is remove its entire insides. And we're going to split it open from one end all the way up to the other. And we're going to remove its insides. And it's just a clean and simple job. But many, many people don't know how to do this, and because of that, a lot of game meat is ruined. So, You need to prop your animal so the belly side is up. And it is best if when you do that, that its hind end is higher than the lower, so that when you make your incision on its anus, that his intestines are pushed forward and don't get in the way of your knife, and you have less chance of cutting into its intestines. So what we're going to do is real quick show you our major cuts. First we have penis here, which we'll cut out separately, his testicles, and that'll all lay on top of his pelvis bone, and we'll pull that aside. And then we're going to take a knife and we're going to split his pelvis bone right here. And from there, we can start opening up his cavity straight up through until we hit his breastplate. And when we do that, we'll take a larger knife and we'll rip right through that. And this would, if it was an elk or a much larger animal, you may need a meat cleaver or an axe, but on deer, you don't need anything larger than just a nice hunting knife. Now we're going to continue right up to its throat. And we're going to remove a windpipe, and we're just going to grab a hold of it and we're going to pull it all the way out. Or you could grab from the back end and pull forward. And everything will just spill right on out. But we've got to get to doing it because we've got a warm critter. For my first incision, I'm going to cut down and get his genitals out of the way. Now I'm keeping my fingertip at the point of the knife as I do this so that I don't dig down too deep and cut into the intestines. Now we see what we have a hold of here. Whether you can see very well or not, I have got a line right here which I'm pulling. And I'm cutting into fat, but not tissue. That's his stomach lining. A sharp knife works great. We have done this with stone tools. Okay, what we have is his urinary tract in my hand. Cut all the way back. It goes back in through his anus. It's out of our way now. There's no danger of cutting that open. Now what we have here is a pelvis bone. We're going to split this. And all we need to do with that is tap a knife down in here, and by forcing this at the same time, this pelvic bone will split wide open. And we've got some connective tissue holding the stomach together right here that you'll want to cut into, because that will help prevent your bone from splitting open. But I'm going to try to carefully cut down to that bone and around it so that you can see it and see exactly what it is that we're trying to split. There is a raised ridge right along the center of that pelvic bone. Right where my finger is going in. The pelvic bone lies, get some of this meat out of the way here. right there. Now with taking, in this case we use a little bit larger knife, if I can find a quick rock, we're going to pop this. And we split this bone plumb open. So now that gives us access to all, well, his anus, his lower intestines, his bowels. And now we'll open his stomach cavity all the way up, rip through his sternum, all the way to the neck, take the windpipe, cut it out, and then we can pull from either direction. And the insides will pretty well fall out, and you'll be able to follow this. All right, now you'll note that I am taking my finger and placing it by the point of that knife so that I push intestines ahead of me as I push that knife up. That will help avoid any cutting of unwanted ingredients. But you'll notice his inside's all just falling out right now in one clean piece. Now I'm reaching his sternum. I just cut through his diaphragm, which is the membrane separating the chest cavity from the stomach cavity. Now I'll take the larger knife. On a larger animal, I'll actually have to straddle it. On some, you'll need meat cleavers or axes. On deer and goat, there's no problem. Just get the center of the sternum and a very sharp upward thrust. I'm going to straddle here real quick. My knife going in is hurting nothing because it's just chest cavity. Now the sternum has been split and I'm going up the throat all the way to its jaw. And at this point I can spin this around, give you a little bit better view of what we're doing because we're about ready to turn them over. Okay, all the cuts have been made. We've opened up the rear end. We split the sternum and we've got the windpipe all the way up to its throat. Now, what it's going to take is a little cutting of the membranes that hold the windpipe and some of the intestines on the inside together as we pull it down. Now, I want to mention here also, we could be coming from the other direction. We could grab a hold, we could split open this rear end and take our knife and clean around it, which we'll do when we finish up, and grab and pull back the opposite way. Many people do. This is just the way I have been doing it for years. Now it takes a knife in here to cut around a little bit. But it's the windpipe we keep pulling. Pull it rather gently. We've got a heart and coming up, and we got lungs. And now I'm going to try to spread this open so you can see it. We have a diaphragm right here by my right hand. That is the lining that separates the stomach and the chest cavity. That has to be cut also. That helps holding everything together. So I'm carefully so I don't cut into the stomach, opening that up on both sides. That's why when you heart or lung shoot an animal, all the blood stays in the forward section. And you have a very, very clean animal when you're done. And after we get this cleaned out, we'll take a bucket of water and rinse this and clean it. Now I can see just what you can't, but I am following the backbone, pulling the windpipe. Everything is pulling loose. Now I'm going to slant this uphill. Normally I would do it downhill, but we'll back it with that log so that intestines fall out this way. But you can see in there
It's just attached along the backbone. And by taking this knife, or a smaller knife, makes no difference. You can use a pocket knife to dress out an animal. You just make slight cuts as you go. We got more diaphragm down here that needs cutting. But that mention for a bucket of water was kind of a hint. This is stomach full. You didn't die hungry, that's for sure. Cutting diaphragm tissue out. Now right here, we're just pulling by hand. All right, we got more membrane in there. Just being careful to cut membrane. You can see that all of the guts are just falling out in front of you. Now we're reaching pretty close to the rear end where we split. And where we could have started from, the other end of our cable, so to speak. I'm going to take my knife, I'm going to move it first to make sure that you can see what I'm getting into. Okay, much better here. It's just a pulling. Now we've split, we're right at that pelvis that we've split. And say, some people, to avoid splitting that pelvis, use a long, like a fillet blade on a knife, and reach in and cut around that instead of splitting that bone. Just so much easier for me to split that bone. Thank you. That's this pile of intestines. I've got one little piece here I missed, which I'm going to get just by reaching down here now. And you've got a field-dressed animal. This is so critical. Instead of running around trying to find all your friends to show them the animal that you shot, this is a stage that should be done. It needs to be cooled down immediately. This meat, as long as it's still warm, is still spoiling. So while that's open, throw a little water in it. In the wintertime we use snow. I'm not worried about the water so much for cleaning because there's nothing to clean in here. The animal's surgically clean on the inside, though he may not argue with you. But more for cooling of the animal. So from here, we're going to skin it out real quick, cut it up into pieces, and get ready to throw it in the freezer. Okay, folks, now we've got the insides cleaned out. We've got it cooled down somewhat with water, but it's a hot day. And because of that, we want to take the outside off, which eventually has to be done to get to the meat anyhow. We try to use a knife as little as possible because we save our skins for tanning. Now we need to open up the front legs. So when we get to pulling the skin on down, it becomes quite a problem. If we do it now, it's a lot easier. So we'll just rip these up real quick and get that done. Now, you notice I made slight cuts on the upper limbs. This is just to get it open so I could get a gambrel in there to keep the back legs spread. Now, I'm going to use this knife as little as I can. Skins, especially on warm animals, pull pretty easily. As long as the tree stays where it's supposed to be. This old goat's as tough as his hide is. It'll be rough eating for someone. Now going around the rear end, we'll cut down through to the tail. Yep. This critter's tougher than I thought it was. We have a tough critter. We're going to use a knife on him quite a ways. It's not because he's set up and it's cold. Okay, we need to cut down into the tail. And we'll cut that tail off. I just cut the tail off in one motion right there. There's a piece of cartilage there. When you find it, it just goes right through it. We're going to try to pull this hide off, or skin. This is a pretty tough old boy, and it's not pulling quite like any deer I've ever skinned. This is called fisting the skin off. Getting your fist back down inside and pulling with your other hand. Now if you start your fisting along the backbone and then push it out towards the flanks, you leave more meat on the animal. Okay, now we'll just cut along the flanks here. Leaving the side meat on the animal. Make a little bit of stew meat. Now you'll see a different layer of meat coming in here at the front shoulder. One time you may need to use a knife. I'm glad I'm not eating this booger. As you get into a neck on most critters, you sometimes get to a need of having to cut. But I've never had anything as tough as this. Of course, I've never skinned an elephant either. God. Jerry, you can come on camera here and hold this foot for me. Hold that out like that. The other one here, please. I'll try to keep my knife away from your fingers.
Oh, I hope so.
Boy, I've never skinned a critter this tough. Now we just normally skin right there to below the hocks, the joints. See if I can get a little pulling up in here. No, there ain't no pulling at all with this animal. It's like a hog, you skin it the whole way. Spin. Okay, when we skin to the ear. Some people like maybe make head cheese or something. They can do what they want with the animal, but we're skinned here. So what we've got now is an animal undressed inside and out. And the way the temperature's been here in December, I'm sweating, huh? It's just plumb hot in here. We got to get cold water on it. We're going to hose it down. That'll be our next step. It is clean. It's a clean animal. We'll pull this excess fat out, but we'll hose it down, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jerry, and Jerry's going to show you how we're going to take this, and we're going to cut it up and package it and put it in the freezer. Well, tell you what, I worked up my sweat. I think it's time to turn it over to Jerry. He's going to show you how to disassemble that thing and put it in the cooler.
Well, before we start cutting them up, we're going to take Billy's sinew off. We use it for a lot of projects. The first cuts are right down alongside the backbone with a sharp knife. Gee. He's tough all over, isn't he? And then we take a dull knife, which is real important. If you use a sharp knife for the rest of this, you're going to cut the sinew. You want to separate this outer layer of fat and membrane. And there you can see the sinew is laying right on top of the tenderloin, or the loin. It's that real shiny, silvery looking stuff. It's made up of a lot of little threads. And we can separate them and use them for sewing, backing bows. It's great stuff. I'm going to insert the pointed, and now this knife is pointed, but it's very dull.
You might want to step back and let the camera see exactly where the knife is at.
Okay. It's up behind where the sinew lays. I can see why we haven't done goats before. Oh, brother. Now as it goes into the shoulder blade here, you can see there's a layer of meat lays on top. You can kind of scrape the top of that. Hold still, okay. And then you can run your finger down, separate that. And usually, just pull it right out. When we get it in the house, we'll lay it out on a flat surface and scrape it clean again to get all the fats and flesh off of it. Where it goes up into the pelvic bone, it starts to knot up, and we don't need that real thick part. So go up as far as it starts knotting, and just cut it off. Oh, that's about 1 foot long. Yeah. The other side's a little backwards getting going. Unless you're left-handed, then it's There. I guess the next step is to take his head off. You want a sharp knife?
Take one foot out.
Well, I could take the other foot off. Yeah, that'd be nice. Our method of cutting up critters doesn't use saws at all. And in fact, the latest book that we're working on, we've cut up deer with a stone tool, stone knives. So all you need is a knife. Now to get this joint, you can feel where it's flat there. And just cut in. You can feel it releases. You can see. How that joint is coming apart there. Come around on the back side and cut those cords. And just off it comes. With the head, you want to find where that head swivels on the neck, and it's right at the base. Thank you. Kind of like The Exorcist, you know, twist your head around. That took care of that. Now we're gonna.
Explain what your four or your major portions are here, Jerry. So
Okay.
folks understand what we're working on.
This is the forearm, shoulder. Then of course you have the neck. Rib cage is through here, flank. And this is the hindquarters. You'll end up with round steaks or roasts out of here. Probably on a deer, I'd probably make a roast out of this part. With goat, maybe you'd use it for stew meat. All the trimmings can be used for stew meat. The most tender meat on any critter is the tenderloin. It's the loin inside. And the next best is this loin that lays on the long side of the backbone. And we'll take those out separate. If you're going to a butcher shop, they'd probably saw across these bones. This would be pork chops or belly chops. Use a smaller knife, I think.
Now I want to mention that on deer, these tenderloins and loins just almost fall off of the animal.
Yes, they do.
Hardly even need to use the knife.
There's the tenderloins. And then loin. Yeah, normally this is just a separate piece of meat that you can work your fingers in underneath and just about pull right out. The next step is going to be to take the front quarter off. It's amazing, the only thing holding this whole thing on is muscle. That bone isn't connected at all. The shoulder blade is held on with muscle. So that comes off real easy. Here's, you can see the blade is exposed. That's real simple. He's getting skinnier. Taking the back quarters off is a little not harder, but you've got to follow the bones around. This bone comes down in around here, kind of comes up a little bit here. Okay, you can see you can see where it moves in there. There's a socket. There. Can you see where that ball is just in there? The ball socket here. It's just held in with membrane, and that's free. Maybe, is that in the shade?
No.
Shade? Okay. There's that ball socket again, and it just comes right out of there. Now we'll take these guys down and start cutting up.
Now here's your pile of meat. Here's going to show you how to handle each individual piece. We have 2 forequarters, 2 hindquarters, the main part, which is mostly neck and ribs, and our loins. And Jerry will do 1 each of the loins in the front and rear shoulders, and show you how to rip apart the in-between.
Mm-hmm. This over here. My whole philosophy on cutting up meat is to get it in a small enough piece to fit in the pan and take the bones out. They take up room in the freezer and poke holes through the paper. So without the bones in there, you've got a better chance of keeping your meat well. I'm going to butterfly these loins. They're kind of small, but they'll be good. Trim this fat off. Just cook them whole? Well, then I'll butterfly these. Now the side on a large loin, this one probably wouldn't make any difference. The side that's to the outside of, next to the skin on the animal, it's usually flatter, so you can get a nicer butterfly by laying that down. Then you'll cut twice as thick as you want your butterfly steaks to be. So we'll just cut this about like that. Then you go back and cut that almost all the way through. I'll get this straight. Then you'll be folding that backwards. Can you see how that fastens together? You've almost cut all the way through. Now this is the steak that they wrap bacon around and call it filet mignon. And you can put bacon around it if you want. Usually falls right apart in your mouth. It's the best part of the meat. Now we'll go on to the front shoulder. I usually make a cut right below this joint. And then free this meat. There's tendons that run down to the bone that holds this meat on. Going to cut through those tendons. Then follow this large bone up. Okay, there's the meat off the forearm. We usually cut it into stew meat. You could take your meat in, or if you have a hand grinder or whatever, and make hamburger out of it. We don't make hamburger. About the only thing you can't do with stew meat that you can do with hamburger is make hamburgers. We make chili, hot dish, even stew out of it. Here I've freeing this meat off of the second joint just by following that bone. I'm working on the inside. This is where the shoulder blade was connected to the inside of the animal. We'll trim this fat away, I think. And you turn it over and cut this piece off. Now this piece I would roll and use for roast, shoulder roast. Now I'm going to take the meat off the blade. Once again, I'm on the inside of the animal. Basically, if you find a bone and follow it with your knife, it's going to come apart. Here the shoulder blade has a ridge to it, so I usually just work up to this side and then switch over to the other side. So working the meat free from the other side of the blade, I'll come over to that same ridge. And just work over it. And this is a roast also, a shoulder roast, and rolled up. Makes good eating. Now, this bone you could still keep for soup bones if you like, boil them up. I'll set this aside and work on the hind quarter. There's only one joint in the hind quarter. Here again, we're going to free the meat from the tendons that attach it to the bones. There's hardly any meat on this side of the bone, so it's easy to follow. And I'll probably cut that off right even with that joint. Here's another nice little roast. Tendon out of there. As you can see, this ball socket's on this end. This joint's on this end. All I have to do is know that there's a bone between, cut down to it, and just peel the meat off of it.
Now, if you go to a store and take it to a butcher, here's where he uses his saw, cuts right through it, and you have your round steak with it with a piece
Yes.
of bone in the middle. What we're doing here is just getting rid of the bone.
So it's still round steak, you just don't get that little ring for your finger. This joint comes up here, so you want to cut down over that. You could use this for a rump roast. We usually make round steak. This kind of ragged edge here we'll trim off. Probably put it in with this roast. Where it's naturally split there, on a larger animal, you could cut it there and cut your steaks. This is pretty small. I think we'll just utilize the whole thing. Chilled meat is easier to slice also. It gets firmer. This is about as fresh as it gets. And here again, you're going to cut thickness for your family's preference. This one might be kind of hard to get a steak out of this piece here. Now with any of these rolled roasts, if you have some pure cotton string, you can get them nice and firmly together and tie them. You want something that's going to withstand the oven temperature, so you wouldn't use any of the nylon strings they have. That just holds the meat together while it's cooking. I don't usually do that and don't seem to have any problem with it. It just makes it look a little more finished. We're going to work on the carcass now. Get some room here. What I'm going to do is trim.
Sticks out of your way, hon.
Okay. What I'm going to do here is trim the meat off here, the flanks, trim some of this fat away, the meat off the neck. That'll be all good stew meat to put in with this forearm. Then I'm going to just take the meat out of the middle of the ribs. So I debone the ribs too. Now as you can see, I've just about finished deboning the carcass. I've just got a couple of rib pieces left to take out, and I'll do that right now. Just insert the knife down alongside a bone. I go at an angle so you get that meat that's on top. Just follow it down. Go back up. Go on the other side. Now I cook this just like barbecued ribs, and it gets real tender, no bones. And that takes care of that animal. Now you can see this is the meat that came off the carcass. This pile here you cut into stew meat or grind it for hamburger, whatever you choose. These rib pieces, like I said, cook just like barbecued ribs. Right here we have the loins and the tenderloins all cut up. Next are the front shoulders and the forelegs with the roasts. And finally we have the hindquarters cut into steaks and roasts, and the sinew. And 3 hours ago this critter was running around, and now he's going to get wrapped up and froze.
So what we've shown you is we're not going to put any butchers out of business. All we're trying to show you is how you can save $30 to $50 per animal by doing it at home yourself with no special tools. Just the pocket knife would have done most of this.
We've done it with stone.
Yes, we've illustrated the book doing it with stone on a larger animal than this. But more importantly out of this, and being thrifty and saving money, is to show you how to properly take the animal from the instant you kill it and turn it into edible meat. Not meat that somebody says, God, tastes terrible, I'll never eat that again. That's just generally due to improper field care. The sooner you cool that animal off, remove its insides, and take that skin off the outside, then the meat is going to be in good shape.